Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's me Swastika, and in this video I will be discussing with you some high yield topics that are important and that have to be covered for your JNU Masters in Political Science, for your DU Masters in Political Science, and also if you are giving UGC NET Political Science paper. So I am basically going to be discussing the NTA UGC NET papers of July 2019 and December 2019. What is basically happening is that across the spectrum of papers in JNU, DU, and also in UGC NET, the question bank is similar because it is being provided by NTA. So it's important for us to quickly understand some of the important concepts that they're continuously putting in all these papers. So in this video I will basically be going over the 2019 concepts that have been derived from the previous year question paper. So let's get down to it.
Okay, so guys, let's start off from the key concepts. So what we have to do in this is that I have essentially done all the hard work for you. I have gone through the two papers of 2019, UGC NET, Political Science, and I have identified some important concepts and key authors that NTA repetitively keeps questioning from 2019, and I have also gone through DU question papers and I've also identified some key concepts from there. So I've basically done all the hard work for you, and now you just have to I'm spoon feeding you the important concepts. So I have also done my masters in political science from Jawaharlal Nehru University. I have done my BA honors in political science from Delhi University, and this video is going to be a long one because a lot of concepts are going to get discussed because there were over 200 questions. So please stay tuned till the end, and I hope you find this useful. So the first thing I came across was Wilfredo Perito. So this is basically, he is someone who inspired Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, and what he came up with was basically a principle of optimality, which states and talks about resource allocation. It basically says that an economic state where resources cannot be reallocated to make one individual better off without making at least one individual worse off. So he basically talks about the optimal distribution of resources, and there is a graph of this optimality in economics that you can look up on Wikipedia right now. And so this basically says that the resource allocation is at an optimal point right in the middle, and if I give X more of something, then that would basically mean giving Y less of the same thing. So this is what he basically said. The second concept that I came across was Nozick on the principle of entitlement. So this basically says that the distribution of holdings in a society is just if and only if everyone in the society is morally entitled to what he has. So Nozick's principle of entitlement was basically pitched against John Rawls. I will be discussing John Rawls in the end because in most of the papers he is question, like there are questions that come because he's a very conceptual thinker, and basically Nozick's principle of entitlement stood in stark contrast to what John Rawls had to say. The next one and the next concept is Foucault on the principle of power. Also guys, just one last thing, that I am basically going through a lot of different concepts in this video. So I am not just going to stick to one thing like theory or public administration. I'm discussing everything because I am assuming that some of these questions can probably get repeated in the question papers. So I'm going through everything. If you feel that this is a bit confusing and a bit too much, I request you to sort of like open Wikipedia or to just keep taking notes so that you can look deeper into these important concepts. So the third one is Foucault on the principle of power. Obviously, Foucault talks about the dispersion of power. This is also something you can look up. The next is John Rawls on the principle of distributive justice. The next is Derrida on deconstructionism. So Derrida basically is a postmodernist thinker who gave the idea of deconstruction and its slightly complicated, but if I have to explain it in simple words, I would say that he said that there are two ways of deconstructing something. The first thing is the inversion, because we've always assumed things and knowledge to exist in binaries. The idea is to inverse what was submissive before into the dominant position, or the idea is to subverse. So these are the two ways in which we can deconstruct a concept, because we primarily view it as a binary. So these are some of the key concepts. You can just Wikipedia it, go through it once, because they are popularly asked. The next one that I'm going to go through is the Marx theory on alienation. So basically, Marx was 25 years old when he came up with his theory of alienation, and he talked about it extensively in economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844. So his concept of alienation was also something that was derived from thinkers like Hegel, and his theory on alienation basically stated that the more the capitalist has, the less the worker has. So in this, he basically said that there is an inverse logic, a logic of inversion that works, which means that if I am a worker who is working under somebody, under a capitalist, then by the very logic of capitalism, the more of myself that I give into the system, the less of myself I have for me. And that is how capitalism operates. So the worker will not only be alienated from the product of his labor, because he is selling off and giving whatever he is producing to the capitalist, but he will also be alienated from his fellow workers. He, after being alienated from his fellow workers, will then be alienated from his nature, and after being alienated from his nature, he would be alienated from himself or from his very soul. So these are the four ways, in the four terms in which Marx talks about alienation, and he first discusses this concept in the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844. This is a very important concept, and this, as I have said, transcends in four ways. In the first place, the worker is isolated from his product. The worker has to give his product to somebody. In the second place, the worker is isolated and alienated and estranged from his fellow workers, because his social time is something that comes under the control of the capitalist. In the third place, the worker is alienated from nature, and lastly, the worker is alienated from himself or his soul. So this is also an important key concept. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. So if you can just Wikipedia this, you will see that, or sorry, just Google this, that a pyramid sort of structure would appear. So this pyramid sort of structure would give you the three needs. One would obviously be physiological, which comes at the bottom. There would be safety. After these needs are fulfilled, you would have needs like love and belonging. After those needs are fulfilled, you would need esteem, and at the very top of the pyramid lies self actualization. So sometimes in MCQs they just simply ask you that hierarchy of needs theory was propagated by who. So it was basically propagated by a Maslow, and it is a triangular pyramidal like structure which places self actualization at the topmost need. But in order to attain self actualization, one first has to attain physiological safety, love and belonging, esteem, so on and so forth. The next is the theory of needs by McClelland. He basically states that every person has one of the three main driving motivators: the needs of achievement, affiliation, or power. The next is theory of X and Y by McGregor, and this was basically stated in his book called The Human Side of Enterprise, which basically says that he basically puts two theories in contrast. So theory X would probably be a more authoritarian theory, where the you would your job would be imposed on you, whereas theory Y would probably be a theory which gives you more job satisfaction, you don't have a strict boss, and all these human needs are taken into consideration. So just try to remember that theory X and Y was given by McGregor in his book The Human Side of the Enterprise. The next is the two-factor theory, which is given by Herzberg, and he discusses certain factors like job satisfaction and job dissatisfaction. Okay, moving on, more key concepts. The next one that I'm going to talk about is David Easton. So this is very important. If you have a political science background, you would have most probably done David Easton and his system theory in your political science classes, and it's very important because he was the forerunner of the behavioralist and the post behavioralist school, and he came up with the idea of a black box. So this was basically input, this was output, and right in the middle there was a black box. So this is also an important key concept. The next thing that I saw was Samuel P. Huntington. So his famous book is basically called Clash of Civilizations. He's written a lot more important books, but the most important one is called Clash of Civilizations, in which he says the next wars will not be fought in anything else, but they would be in terms of economy or militarily, but the next wars would be fought on the basis of culture. So he also talks about waves of democratization, and guys, this is very important because for some weird reason NTA really likes asking questions related to Samuel P. Huntington. So please try to keep in mind that he gave us the three waves of democratization. The first one was the slow wave of the 19th century. The second was the wave after the World War II. And the third wave was the beginning of the mid 1970s in South Europe, followed by Latin America and Asia. So Samuel P. Huntington is super important, very popularly asked, can come at any point of time. You have to remember that his book is called Clash of Civilizations, that the next wars would be fought on the basis of cultural factors, and that he gave the waves of democratization. Okay, so the next is this. This you just have to remember that Fabianism means peaceful change. Also, you can, if you can't remember this, just try to remember Jawaharlal Nehru was super into Fabianism and socialist Fabianism sort of thing. So he wanted to be socialist, but peacefully and easily. The next is guild socialism, which is basically professional representation. The next is syndicalism or trade unionism. So these are some key terms you can just keep in mind. Okay, so in a couple of people asked me that some statements they come out of nowhere, and I have tried to identify some of the statements for you that NTA just asks randomly in this question papers. One is that every state is known by the rights it maintains. So this was basically given by Lasky. Lasky is a neo-Marxist. He was also a pluralist, but then he later transitioned into becoming a neo-Marxist. So he said something like that every state is known by the rights it maintains. His important book is called The Grammar of Politics, and it was written in 1925. Also, Lasky sort of introduced and influenced thinkers like Robert Dahl, who are famous in the pluralist school of thought. So you just can keep those things in mind. The next thing is that distributive justice is mainly concerned with the distribution of honors and wealth. So this was said by Aristotle, and Aristotle is also considered the father of political science. So a lot of the questions that are going to come to you like this, where they are going to ask you to identify the thinkers, you basically have to go through Western political thinkers, like the important ones. So you start off with Plato, Aristotle, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, and you move on to Marx. So every time somebody asks you something related to social contract, in all probability they are asking you about thinkers like Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. So to identify thinkers, you just have to identify their key ideas. So whenever we talk about ideas that emanate from an individualistic tendency, we understand that it is going to be about social contract. And every time somebody talks about social contract, the first thing that should come to your mind is Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. On the other end of the spectrum, if somebody talks about something related to Marxism, then that entire school is very different, and that emanates from the thought and the idea of there being a commune life, of there being a community. So this is how you will identify things at the two opposite ends of the spectrum. Okay, so this is important. Rajni Kothari, there is a short article that he's written on India's political takeoff. I strongly recommend that you go through it because he's a very important thinker. And in almost all the papers, something or the other related to Rajni Kothari is bound to come up. So please go through him. And what we have to basically understand about Rajni Kothari is that he was the founder of the study of developing societies, and he founded this in 1963. He was also the student of Gabriel Almond. So for 4 months in between, he was in Stanford University with Gabriel Almond. And because of that, he sort of took the idea of structural functionalism from Gabriel Almond and tried to apply that to the Indian context. He also used the term politicization of caste in Indian politics for the first time. This is also a popularly asked question. His notable works include Politics in India, which was in 1970, Caste in Indian Politics, which was in 1973, Rethinking Democracy, which was in 2005, and Memoirs, Uneasy is the Life of the Mind. If I'm not wrong, this was in 2002. So, as I said, what we have to remember about Rajni Kothari is that he was a pioneer in the field of political science, and you can go through his article called "In India's Political Takeoff," and he founded the Center for Study of Developing Societies in 1963. So, in a lot of ways, Rajni Kothari acted as a bridge between American and Indian politics. We have to understand that because we know that he was in Stanford with under Gabriel Almond for a certain amount of time, and he sort of took to the idea of structural functionalism and he applied it in the form of modernization theory in India. So he basically introduced modernization theory and its correlates structural functionalism in India. And this modernization theory sort of gave us one path. And that path was that the only path to modernization, to modernize properly, is to westernize. So if India has to become a modern society, then India has to become Western. So it basically performed the function of imperializing India. So in that sense, they applied and acted as the bridge between American and Indian politics. It's also important to remember that this work, the modernization, which was a correlate of structural functionalism, emanated from the works of Talcott Parsons and Edward Shills in 1957. So Rajni Kothari is a super important author, and obviously one of the favorite questions that they want to ask is that who introduced the term politicization of caste in Indian politics for the first time. It was Rajni Kothari. The next important concept that I'm going to go through is Sanskritization. So this is basically a sociological concept, but it's super important from the perspective of political science as well. So this was basically coined by M.N. Srinivas, who is an Indian sociologist in 1950. So this, what it basically means, Sanskritization, is that there is a process by which castes or tribes placed lower in the caste hierarchy seek upward mobility by emulating the rituals and practices of the dominant or upper caste. So, Sanskritization is also like Brahmanization in the sense that we understand that there is a caste system, a Varna system that has operated in India for centuries, and the castes at the bottom would now want to emulate and act like upper castes, Brahmins, and this process of upward social mobility, where the lower castes try to act like upper castes, is basically called Sanskritization. And it's mostly a sociological concept because there is a caste hierarchy in place, and in this caste hierarchy, the lower castes want to mobilize and become like the upper caste. So the process is similar to passing in sociological terms. In a broader sense, it is called Brahmanization, and it is a historical process in which local Indian religious traditions become aligned and absorbed within the Brahmanical tradition, creating a pan Indian tradition of Hinduism. So this is what it is. This is something that they like asking. NTA likes asking questions on M.N. Srinivas, so you have to keep him in mind. So M.N. Srinivas also came up with works like Remembered Village in 1978, which is an ethnological work. So this is basically about the villager who lives in a small village named Rampura in the state of Karnataka. And what is important and perhaps what is interesting about this work is that there are no footnotes, there are no citations to it, even though it's an ethnological work. He has also written more stuff like Indian society through personal writings and also village caste, gender, and method essays in Indian social anthropology. Okay, so the next thing is pluralist theory. I am going to quickly cover this because it has been asked several times. I've seen this question related to pluralist theory in not just NET. I've seen it in Delhi University Masters entrance papers. I have seen it in JNU entrance papers. So let's quickly go through it. So the major proponents of this theory are Robert Dahl, David Truman, Seymour Martin Lipset. So basically, classical pluralism is the view that politics and decision making are located mostly in the framework of government, but that many non governmental groups use their resources to exert influence. The central question for classical pluralism is how power and influence are distributed in a political process. So this basically means that in a democracy, there is a plurality of groups. Groups like trade unions exist, pressure groups exist, and a lot of these non-governmental groups, they want to exert their influence in the political process. So this is basically related to that how decision making has to take place when a lot of different groups, a lot of plural groups are present. So, a polyarchy is a situation of open competition for electoral support within a significant part of the adult population, and it ensures competition of group interests and relative equality. So, the pluralist theory basically has that there are a lot of competing group interests in a democratic society, and how do we decide that power and influence is distributed amongst different groups? That's something that this theory likes to ponder upon. So a lot of questions are basically asked ki, who are the proponents of the pluralist theory. So just keep in mind Robert Dahl, David Truman, Seymour Martin, Lipset. So the pluralists also stress upon civil rights such as freedom of expression and organization and an electoral system with at least two parties. So just have to keep this in mind. The next one that we are going to discuss is John Rawls. So I have discussed him earlier also. He is basically an egalitarian thinker who came up with a theory of justice. So in this, I am going to go through three things. One is justice as fairness, one is political liberalism, and his writings on the laws of people. It's a bit difficult to explain everything, so I am just telling stuff that can be asked in MCQs, and I'm mostly explaining stuff from an MCQ perspective. So, his theory of justice as fairness describes a society of free citizens holding equal basic rights and cooperating within an egalitarian economic system. His theory of political liberalism delineates the legitimate use of political power in a democracy and envisions how civic unity might endure despite the diversity of worldviews that free institutions allow. His writings on the laws of people set out a liberal foreign policy that aims to create a permanently peaceful and tolerant international order. So just keep in mind he's an egalitarian a who came up with the book A Theory of Justice. He also gave us theories of justice as fairness, his theory of political liberalism, and the laws of people. MCQ, this is what they are going to ask you. The next is Mary Wollstonecraft. So she's basically a feminist and is famous for the book called A Vindication of the Rights of Women with strictures on political and moral subjects. So questions related to her are popularly asked. It's again an examiner's favorite question. So basically, what she says is that her analysis of the condition of women in modern society retains much of its original radicalism. One of the reasons her pronouncements on the subject remain challenging is that her reflections on the status of the female sex were part of an attempt to come to a comprehensive understanding of how human relations within a civilization increasingly governed by acquisitiveness and consumption. So she's talking about a consumerist society, she's talking about the female sex, and she's talking about the vindication of the rights of women. She's a key thinker, she's a feminist, and that is all you have to keep in mind for your master's entrance. Okay, so thank you for watching this. I will come up with more and more videos. So this was only a brief discussion of key concepts that were discussed in 2019 NTA UGC NET papers, political science. In the next video, I will be going through the 2018 papers for June and December, and I will be discussing the key concepts that have been asked over there. So in case you like my content, please don't forget to subscribe. That's going to be absolutely great. Thank you for watching.